Sanbonani Makhaya, and welcome to another episode of Daily Thetha la SABC 1. Njengabantu abasha sitholithe ukuthi sihlale phansi sikhulume sixoxe ngezinto ezisiaffectayo phinde futhi sibuye sikwazi ukuthi sixoxe kancane nje ukuthi lento leyiseduze nami or ikude kumina ngegama mina ke uMeldo kami yokugcwala sibe uzizo umunja lo. Namhlanje sila endabeni ungakhothi ukuthi ngibiza uSheriff phinde futhi angihambe ngedwa ngihamba noSis Fortune wakaMadlala who is our sign interpreter. Inkulumo esikhuluma ngalo namhlanje it's very deep but also very questionable ngobani sikhuluma ngokuthi impilo esiphilile thina ezama-Afrika phinde futhi sibheke impilo yama-Black Americans ukuthi siyahlangana or noma asihlangani siswami
Nakalibitso Melody ke na Nicolette wa Gamashile ngwana wa kwa Bushback Rich Mapulaneng. And as Melody's already said, and I think it's a conversation Melody sontere lebele go gore na re botse question ya gore ge motho wa mo Africa anka inspiration from African Americans, people accuse them of copying, they accuse them of emulating, they accuse them of saying, "Hi man, you guys are losing culture as Africans." Now that is very, very important because it then speaks to the connection that we've got between, or the relationship per se, that we've got between African Americans and African people. Are we afraid of them? Rabataba now. Or are we? But come in, let's booze.
Oh no, we should get Zulu. I see Basabi.
No. But that's what we are looking at. That question, what is the connection? And is it always conflict? Is it always a bad thing? We are saying African Americans don't even know where Africa is. They can't even point where South Africa is on the map. Why is it that? Where is the education? And also, are African American studies the same as African studies? Rune more South Africa, Rune more Africa, more Ghana, more Ethiopia, more Liberia. Are we learning the same things that Americans are learning?
There's a Black American bekabona umuntu obuya Africa as a foreigner or a tourist. Ibeke kanjalo ibe simple. Kanjalo uzokwazi ukunderstand ukuthi namhlanje sifuna ukubona ukuthi thina sibukana kanjani besibeke sibukweni. But sicela ukukhumbula ukuthi wena on social media we need you to be able to be a part of inkulumo yethu. Please utilize the hashtag which is Daily Thetha. Also don't forget ukuthi you can be a part of our Facebook live and you can be able to watch this at any time between namhlanje nakusasa kuseni. Phinde futhi awusifonele.
011-339-1315. Let's also celebrate what are some of the partnerships and collaborations as Africans and African Americans. But for now, let's welcome our studio guests. And I think maybe Ritome my brother Mona. My brother, as somebody who is a musician, right? You are in the music industry. Do you feel that there is some inspiration from African Americans?
My name is Jan Vers. I'm an upcoming hip-hop artist. Yes, there's a lot of influence and cultural influence that I can take from them, and also the work ethic in terms of studio and putting out music that's actually going to sell and make money so that we can make a difference in our communities.
Do you feel your music only if you take some inspirations from African Americans?
No, not really, but I'm just talking in terms of how the American music industry is shaped.
Okay, tell us, we don't know. We're not musicians like you. So tell us, how is that shaping?
Well, a lot of young people are encouraged to do commercial music.
Okay.
So that they can come out of whatever struggles they face in the ghettos of America from gangsterism and stuff. They get taught from a young age how to make music that's going to sell and appeal to the radio or to the national standard.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. And Melody, before I get like maybe give say my sister, does she feel the same way? My sister, do you feel African Americans have something from Rona as Africans? Is there some cultural anything that we've got, arts? Is there anything that they can take from us that can inspire them perhaps to look at Africa and say, actually, let me dress like this. It's in Kogi space, because Africa sikhona and labantu laba bafana nami.
Kamalam olwakhe ngathi khona mina cause ubuyajonga America I don't think banayi culture cause here we have umaskandi.
Okay.
We have indlame. We have all those stuff. But America it's only rap and whatever and those things. Banayo I don't think banayo it's traditional.
So do you think Tina as Africans have we done enough ukuthi singayithatha yethu i-culture siyise e-America ukuthi nabo bakwazi ukuthi bayazi ukuthi senzani la Africa?
No.
You don't think we've done enough?
No, inkinga ngicabanga ukuthi thina la thina bantu bala Africa ni
Yeah.
sisithathela phansi.
Okay.
Just because some of us siyakhohlwa ne ukuthi siphuma phi siya kuphi singobani.
Yeah.
Abanye ba end up bethatha la lifestyle la landuza yabo la lifestyle yabo bayenza culture yabo. Some ubiyabona like let's say kuma musician like uyabona abo sorry bizamagama like abo NSTC.
Yeah.
NSTC ngowalapha South Africa.
Okay.
Mara ucula the way yacula ngakhona ungathi ngum-Black American usuka phesheya.
Okay, ibambeka lapha Melody uyizwile bathi NSTC sounds like he's Black American.
Ay siswami so ikhuluma ngelila ngokumanje ngicela ungena kuThabiso Mbotha othi in the terms of history Africa at homes and Africa and Americans in the 1960s and 70s they were both fighting for independence with their prominent leaders Malcolm X and Martin Luther King the late Jr. in America and Steve Biko in SA who had common philosophies of somehow or where somehow there was a connection there. I think for me it's also the understanding ukuthi Black history yethu has not been celebrated enough because that's why America every year during this Skathina celebrates the month of love. Bona America celebrates the month of Black excellence, reflecting and reconnecting, and that's why we found it important namhlanje sikhulume ngale nto ukuthi yini ngempela lehlanganisayo mhlambe that keeps us apart or how are we not understanding each other as the African Black American and or as the African child like Africa. But I'm thinking when quickly ubuye kasi awuthase lokushini awungitshela ukuthi do you feel ukuthi kune disconnect between thina amajite lokushini like kasi versus the ghetto bayibona ngakhona is there a difference or into eyi-one?
Dumelang ke nna moruti kushira moshu from Shampopo Limpopo bana betso rena le batho ba ka kua America a rena different no ba inyane fela rena ka mo Mzansi re bola keng motho nya ka mmereko wa bereka go la salary nyana tse pedi wa relax o lo fa mmereko go deposit rona le tšhelete rena ka mo South Africa ra re making sure gore no o thola di sente nyana ka botleng o se kwa relaxa o bereke gore o kgone swara di niti tsa go le wante tsa rena re a leboga South Africa e kgonne ba re fa bohlale nna ke nna moruti kutshi ke rapa ka Sepedi.
Oh, before ngena khona we quickly have to go for an ad break. Kumele ukuthi sokhokha lapha kancane kodwa before sokhokha but ngithande the way ubambe ngakhona before ndilukhumbuthi the way up he brought in his element and owning his tongue but also it makes us understand is it going to be easier for our brothers in America or sisters in America to be able to relate to us because there's also a barrier of languages.
Yeah, let's go to a quick ad break. When we come back, we speak to people who have understood the history of African American and Africa. Dumelang, welcome back. We're having a very interesting conversation. And because we understand the connection yo ya Africa and African Americans, each one guy, and how far back does it date? Now we understand there's social, there's cultural, there's a whole lot of economical, connections in terms of Africa and America. And we're trying to get that understanding, Professor, and welcome Baba Buntu. And Professor, I mean, you've done quite a lot of work in this space, and you've understood Khurna, you've gone as far back as understanding what types of immigration was happening when people were moving from Africa into America and from America into Africa. Baba Buntu, as a cultural expert, and what you've done with Ebukosini Solutions, there's just so much that you guys can share with us. And maybe perhaps, Professor, we'll start with you and get an understanding of why. I mean, when you were listening to some of your work, the first paragraph you read is about how your mom, who's married to a man from Africa, she's African American, and she was not able to pinpoint where Sierra Leone was on the map. Why then did you go into these kind of studies?
Well, obviously my personal history, as you've just indicated, got me interested in it, but also because as an 18-year-old, having lived in Africa for that part of my life and going to study in the United States and realizing the ignorance about Africa among Americans in general, but particularly distressing among African Americans, that they didn't know about our history, that they didn't know where places were.
Yeah.
And so I got very interested in that, and I do a lot of that kind of teaching with my students because I think it's important. Even if then African Americans are not interested in Africa, they should know something about it because it's part of their heritage.
You speak about the ignorance of African Americans, and you always try to contrast, and you speak about it in the 1960s and also now currently. Do you feel that coming here and doing some of the lectures that you were doing, promoting your new book, is there also a similar ignorance from Africans in terms of the history of African Americans?
Oh, absolutely. I grew up in Sierra Leone, and what stereotypes we had of African Americans were horrible. I mean, they were criminals, they were, right? Or the TV shows that we watched. We were not taught African American history. I went to school, secondary school in Sierra Leone. I learned British history, but I did not learn African American history. So it goes both ways.
Yeah, very interesting.
Sure. And it obviously wants me then to kind of want to ask you that, I mean, we live in a new age where you can obviously understand that we are interacting with Americans on social media. We're seeing them on Instagram, but we're also are getting lost in what they see of us. And I mean, I said earlier on the show, there was a culture clash on social media where we were teasing them on their names. They were teasing us on having names that, like, it was whole like for me, it was distressful, but probably from your aspect as adults and elders and people who are much knowledgeable, what are we not seeing with the naked eye?
I think, to start with, I don't think we often see the design behind this. White supremacy and colonialism and the very disturbing history that has been done to us collectively as African people, however much we individually relate to it and are aware of it. There's a design to divide and rule African people. So we are fulfilling that design when we have issues with each other because you speak this language, because you twang, because you have a name that I don't like. Like, we play into these things quite easily. And we do it, even here in South Africa, we do it on the continent. And we also do it globally. And I think we need to remind ourselves that even when we talk about Africans in America, because I like to call people African, just African. And then we have an American experience, we have a South African experience, we have different experiences. But we also need to remember that when we talk about African Americans, we're not talking about the whole of the diaspora. I think sometimes we look to African Americans and we think that's the all there is. But that's likely a small portion, that's probably 10% of the African diaspora out there.
But, sorry, just to jump in there, but should we be offended if a black American or African American says, I'm not African?
No.
I'm not of African descendants because
Okay, so
No,
we're going to... So you say your piece first, then
No,
I'll...
you should not.
I'm
sorry.
No, please.
So for me, it's a big thing, is that
Yeah.
I want to understand, because I mean, as youngsters, we feel like we want to be accepted by Americans, or Americans should be accepted by us, and there's just yet again a confusion.
You have to understand that there have been hundreds of years of particular ways that Africa has been represented to African Americans, as savage, as primitive, as backward, as needing uplift and civilization. And that persists. And so if you're told over and over again that the place that you came from is backwards and primitive and savage, why would you want to identify with that place? Why would you want to connect with that place? And I think, you know, I'm probably the elder on this stage, and I've seen it over the years, that change as education becomes available, as African Americans come to learn about Africa, that changes. The positive aspects remain. But stereotypes persist. The representations of Africa still remain not what they should be. In the outside world, and that includes the United States.
Baba Buntu, it sounds like it's a
So
no
I
from
agree
you.
that I'm not necessarily offended in that sense, but I'm very saddened what has been done to us. I mean, we also have Africans on the continent who, for instance, in South Africa, some of us don't identify with the rest of the continent. We are ashamed. We try to convince the world that I'm not like that African. And so we live with a very common history of how we relate to the stereotypes and the negativity that has been put out there. And even if we now know that that's not necessarily true, we are still marked by it. We still make jokes about it. I mean, you can base your career as a stand-up comedian these days still on just doing very disturbing jokes about us as a people. And I think, for me, why I think it is important that we relate is, think about it, we have had this dialogue with music, with expression. We think about what hip hop at least used to mean. I'm not sure what it means right now, but it used to mean to give a voice to powerless people to talk from a place of poverty and understand where you came from. Think about even the fact that we now on the continent have started to appreciate natural hairstyles to some extent. That was also popularized through people in the diaspora. So I think we have learned a lot from each other. We also need to appreciate that.
But perhaps maybe if we get a better picture of when African Americans helped Africa, it would start to change the narrative a little bit. And maybe you guys can take us through that, because now we understand there's quite a rich history of that, you know, African Americans coming in to help fight against the Italian colonization and all that. Maybe you can take us through that just quickly.
Yeah. And I chronicle that and if I had a reason for writing this book beyond teaching my students, my American students, it was to show that there has been this long-standing relationship back and forth where Africa influences African Americans influence Africa, whether we're talking about the Black missionary movement, problematic, but there, or whether we're talking about the civil rights movement and how that influenced African nationalism. You mentioned the Ethiopia war with Italy. African Americans went and fought in that war. Many people don't know that story, right? Down to our day, whether we want to talk about Oprah or just other African Americans who, during the apartheid struggle, I was in college in the 80s, and the African Americans were at the forefront of the anti-apartheid movement and the calls for divestment and for the release of Nelson Mandela.
And I think a lot of young people now currently see it as America only comes in to help Africa when it's like a charity thing or an aid, or it seems beneficial for them. It almost feels like they know we exist, but they don't really know.
Like the step brother, step sister in the family that we want to bring into the picture, but we're not even sure that they're in. I'll take a quick one from social media, and then we'll get to see an insert that speaks more about this. This is from Bulteria. Says, most of y'all are talking about how Africans in Africa are still in touch with their roots. While the expectation is the rule, there are Africans in America who are more in touch with their African side than Africans living in Africa. For example, I started embracing my Africanness, skin color, and natural hair after I realized more African American women were doing so. I learned more about Black consciousness from Africans living in America than my brothers and sisters here in Africa. Hey.
That's a good calling out, though, because I can relate to that, because when I was in the States, a gentleman stopped me in the street and said, "Do you know Julius Malema?" I was like, yes, we do. I wanted to hush him. I was like, please just no. He's like, no, that's our African brother, you know? And that for me was like, wow, that's such a big connection. But Tepo did go to the Streets Melody and he spoke to Sisin Tsikima Zwai. Let's see what she had to say.
Daily Thetha family dumelang batho ba modimo le bitso ke ena Tshepo wa ga Khomari ke tswile hape ke strateng ka shekolene ke tlo bua le batho ba bang beleng gore Afrika Borwa mona e tsida o dumellana le ena kapa ha o dumellane le ena mara nnete ya ha o tla e bua ke bua ka ena ntse ke Mazwai sehlo se re tla be re se tshwere re tla be re botsa rona ha o sheba ma America a tswang America ba batho ba batho ba re hlompha jalo ka rona batho ba batho ba Afrika Borwa mona na le hore na relationship ya rona na ena le value kapa ke rona ba dulang batla ka mora bona ke tsene ntse dipotso tse re tla be re di botsa tseo strateng ka shekolene ha re kopana le ena ntse ke Mazwai re nwa tie tlo le rona. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sipping tea with Ntiki Mazwai today. If South Africa was a movie, she'd play two roles. She'd be a villain and a hero at the same time. Rebatla bua le wena Ntiki today about something that has been largely debated, and you've been in the midst of it as well, right there in the thick of it. The relationship between African Americans and Africans. Do you find it to be a relationship that has the same respect and the same value on both sides for the Africans and the African Americans? Kapa rona African ruler
I'm American. I'm not celebrating Amakawa and Amakawigasi. So I'm born by white in Admele. We must be the ones holding America up. Where that tweet came from was from the fact that, in fact, we point at cultural imperialism.
Yeah.
Oba, go figure these Americans in South Africa. They are all over our TV, all over our radios, all over our media, and then our local talent suffers because now we're not longer paying attention to umculo wethu, isintu sethu, speaking abantu who, first of all, are not even educated. That's another thing that irritates me the most. But intanga yamu Beyonce, ne? You keep comparing me to this Beyonce. Nimbege paya, I'm way more educated than Beyonce.
Yeah. Hona le hlakore le leng ha se ntse ke batho ba bang ba re batho ba bo ba attackang ba tswang America are also black people. They are black people, so why put them down? Are you putting them down at all if you are?
No, I disagreed with that.
Yeah.
I remember when they were saying Kobe Bryant is black, this is black consciousness. I'm like, no, it's not. America didn't come to a standstill when Winnie Mandela died. And we've got to acknowledge that Winnie, in our lifetime, is the only type of spirit we've seen like that.
Yeah.
We've never seen a spirit like that, even globally, whatever.
Yeah.
So this should have been an icon that was celebrated on a level that we've never seen before. So I was like, oh, okay, if the top Americans don't have time for someone that I revere so much, who's done so much.
Then why should you have time for them?
Why should I have time for them?
So there's also this perspective that people who disagree with on the relationship of Africans and Americans, like Nsiki, are bitter people. They just want to bring this whole sourness to society. Are you sour?
Abantu abamnyama siyakwazi ukukhomelana emachisa nyama. But angikwazi ukukhomela ama-American.
So we are still subjects, essentially,
I'm like,
to the Americans.
Like, pick yourselves up. Like, stand tall. Like,
but what do
I
you
need the black child to understand, but the poverty in America is worse than
the poverty locally?
The poverty locally. So you need to understand that the black child overseas is disadvantaged compared to us. So that's why I'm confused when you're putting the disadvantaged child higher than yourself. My thing is that it's impossible for the true African to be cowering for African American who was taken with slave ships and doesn't know who they are anymore.
Siyanamukela back here on Daily Thetha la SABC 1 la qhubeka khona nenkulumo yethu kuhlele ekhaya mhlawumbe uqeda ungena endlini ngempela siyajabula ukuthi ukwazile ukuthola ithuba ukuthi nawe uzwe kancane ngenkulumo yethu namhlanje ngoba sikhuluma kakhulu ukuthi ubudlelwane bethu as African blacks, and of course just as Africans too, the American black child that is there by descendant of coming from Senegal, coming from Nigeria, and how over the years mhlawumbe sesaba nokuhlukana saba nokuhlangana, because I mean during apartheid there were so many people who were involved. I mean you talk about Black Panther who are part of it. Most recently, we saw the likes of people who were in America were sitting and saying, fees must fall. But now as we sit in certain conversations, the big part and point last corner, mind you, understand where do we start crossing over. And of course, Bantu, I would like to bring you back just a bit, just to extend your thoughts for me, especially on what Stigi said, speaking a lot because she's always seen as a controversial person. I mean, she spoke about how South Africans are expected to celebrate legends that die internationally who are blacks and African Americans that then when it comes to South Africans that pass on, we don't see that outcry. We don't see people shifting tables to show us their compassion. Where are we missing it in that gap?
Well, first of all, I don't think Nziki Mazwai is controversial. I think she's just being honest in a way that some of us become uncomfortable.
Yeah. Okay.
I think what she talks about is the structural issues, that there's a way that America just sits way up there, and even if you are black, your blackness is a little bit more likable and a little bit more desirable. But when blackness comes from like deep Africa, then it's not as hot and interesting anymore. And we play into these power dynamics. I mean, I think all of us, if we are really honest, we have spoken, we have used mannerisms that we have seen on TV representing African American culture. The other question, of course, is does it really represent African American culture? Is gangsterism, is talking in a very negative way that we see in reality shows, is that really African American culture? Maybe it's more about stereotyping and benefiting from a stereotype, because there's a certain coolness now that we also see African women copy from the, talk to the hand type of thing that we kind of learned as if it is an African American thing. So for me, I think there is something to be aware of, and in South Africa, we also need to be careful because we are also getting that dynamic now. Other people in Africa also say, oh, another one from South Africa, they think they're better. But this is also structural. These are also systems that are playing with our minds, so we need to be aware of where this come from. And we cannot just sit and adore a people because they come from a certain place. We should at least have respect for them because of what they do and who they are. But we also need to understand that again, the design that I keep coming back to, that has made us see ourselves in a certain way and also see each other in a certain way.
Nice. Sure. Thank you so much. We appreciate the contribution. Also, Lanage, we are and we've got Oresia, who's also joining us, who is a part of our conversation. Not just her alone, we've also got Wema. And between the two of you ladies, I mean, there's so much context and experience. And I mean, we speak about the nations in Africa alone in terms of how far we've come, but also from our bird's view, from what we see ourselves as, does it reflect on what they see us as when you talk about the American black community? Anyone can go first.
Greetings from Brooklyn, New York. I'm happy to be here. You know, honestly, I believe that art is a catalyst for change. That we've always used art as a place to speak to our own experiences and to relate to each other. And I know that there's a quote that is very deep and close to my heart. Nina Simone said, you know, I believe the role of an artist is to speak to the times. And we do that. And it is through that we're able to really share our stories and really shape our understanding of each other, and not just base it in the stereotypes, not just leave it on the surface, but really to go deeper and deeper. I've done a lot of work through Bridges, a Pan-African arts movement, which I developed back in 2015 when I first started traveling to South Africa and coming back and forth.
We've just been told a bit of a technical issue with your mic, so let's quickly go to Oresha and maybe perhaps pose the same question, you know, and maybe slightly, if listening to what Baba Buntu has just said, there's this idea that America is a superpower. And I think America, because it's a very patriarchal country, not patriarchal, patriotic country, they believe in that. So when they position themselves as that. How then do we get them to also understand that Africa is building, Africa is coming, Africa is here, embrace us?
I think that, hi everyone, Oresia, and I think that the question should actually be more around how do we get to embrace ourselves as a powerhouse.
Okay.
And while we do that, I remember there's a conversation you were having earlier also around content. They are a powerhouse even in terms of the content that they produce. So as she said, through art, when we go onto YouTube, when we go online, what do we see? We see that, and then that continues to shape our culture. But what happens when we start to think of ourselves as a powerhouse? What happens when we start to produce our own content? I like this show because you're able to speak in English, in Zulu, in Sotho, whichever words that come easy to your mouth, that's what you speak in. Let it be a translation for them to read and try and understand what we're saying.
So we need to be able to put us, and just holding it there, because I did speak to Emma before the camera started rolling, that I was going to call her out for not being able to speak Setswana, right? If you had not married a South African man, how much of Africa would you know?
Oh man, the interesting part is that I fell in love with Africa way before I met my husband. First, I should give a proper greeting and say Dumela, because at least I can say a few words. My husband is Sepedi, and so I'm learning. I'm in the process of learning, but unfortunately, it is not easy for us to like develop and have a relationship cross-continentally when the fact remains that it makes it really difficult for Africans on the continent to travel
to America.
And that is deeply rooted in racism, and it's an issue that America and the world needs to deal with. To go back to really thinking about placement, honestly, Africa is the birthplace of civilization. And you have to realize that once you start to understand your history, it's not the beginning within the last 50 to 100 years. It's generations and generations. So as I started learning about my history, that's when I fell in love with Africa. I would say from my parents' understanding of Africa, you know, we were literally on the forefront working against the anti-apartheid movement. In the 80s, when I'm a little girl, I had this big yellow sign in my house that said stop apartheid. And I had no idea what it meant. But it was deeply rooted in understanding history and culture and how interconnected we are. So,
and the people around you? Your friends, your family?
I think that one, in the first place, you try to associate and build with people that have like minds.
Similar interests.
And it's important for us to do that because that is the way that we bridge an understanding and grow. And for people that don't have similar mindsets, because we live in this world, it's not a singular space. It's important to have that dialogue. It's important to talk about it. I have a friend of mine, actually my sister's good friend. She has some really, really strong issues and thoughts about Africa that she would never visit here because of the ideas that were placed in her mind. And it's us being here. It's my sister going back home for the first time. This is her first year here. Going back home and telling those stories and really reshaping the narrative. We have to talk with each other. It's not something that can happen instantly, but it's work that needs to be done in many different veins.
So before we quickly go for an ad break, I just want to probably get your part is that, remember also we're dealing with so many things in the cultures that we come from. And and in our society, as a woman who'd say, I've traveled the world and I've seen different corners, do you feel the connection with the other countries? Do you feel like there's a disconnection, or do you feel like if you would sit with the lady from Senegal, Nigeria, do you feel a difference in any point?
No, there's a lot of similarities, especially because, just for example, language, as we were speaking about, Swahili. When I listen to Zulu, if I take time to listen carefully, then I can pick out keywords because it's Bantu. If we look at the type of food we're eating as people, but this only happens through exposure. Because you can see that I'm an African, I'm a Kenyan who lived in Uganda, who's lived in America, who's come to South Africa, and somebody's telling me, oh, is it Kwere Kwere? Is it Kenyan? Is it whatever? And I'm like, we're so similar. If you just took some time to, as he said earlier, respect each other. We don't have to like each other, just respect each other on a human level. Like, you're African, I'm African, you're African American, you're Black. I just need to understand, and from there I have compassion and I'm able to understand, like, oh, we're very similar.
And I think because there's quite a lot that Horatio has just said now, and I think also speaks to what Baba Buntu has just said about even South Africa as a country relating to other African countries and then relating to African Americans. But stay with us after the break. We're carrying on with our conversation. Back on Daily Thetha, right here on SABC 1. If you join a conversation, African Americans and Africans, are they similar? Are we the same people? Do we share some similarities and commonalities when it comes to our history? And how then do we forge relationships going forward? And to be quite honest, which is a question that we'd really, really like the professor to come in on, is it even worth it? But before we get an answer from the professor, let's quickly go and see
I would just like to ask Ntatemeleti, from your own perspective, what do you think about the relations between African Americans and Africans at this particular moment?
Many people still think of the old relationship when Africa was colonized and African Americans were helping us to fight colonialism, providing scholarships for African students, and so on.
It is nuanced. We can't say that it's a fraught relationship or it's a friendly relationship. We have to look at it. We have to break it down on the political level, at the state level. It's not particularly a very good relationship.
Like right now that we're having is power imbalances in terms of and how we view them, right? So, for instance, if I say there is an American in the room, we are born by South Africa because because the media has made it possible to be like that. When
African Americans go to West Africa, most of the time people refer to them as Oyinbo, which is white in English. So they kind of think they are, because America is white, so they think of them in that term.
I suspect it's more to do with our own inferiority complexes rather than that the African Americans are looking down on Africans.
People often speak of the tension between African and African Americans. No, we've been working together since the 1960s, the 1800s. You just don't know your history. African Americans are the same thing, the same, where you're not in control of the narrative. You get misinformed. And so that is one of the things, is just understanding the history of us working together, not just focusing on the tension.
The United States has over 600 companies in South Africa. So the Americans know what they can, that Africa is a good partner to have. The young people have to understand there's huge amount of wealth in the African American population. There's a huge amount of skills in the African American population.
Once we kill that hierarchy of superiority complex and the inferiority complex, then we are on a way to think about how do we then collaborate in terms of businesses and everything. I'm not your intern, I'm an African thinker. All the knowledge that you're thinking you're going to get from Africa, I am theorizing from my own personal experience. That's why I'm making sense.
Conversation Steve Biko's black consciousness. And if you are black consciousness, iko Africa, America, imo Africa, imo South Africa, or because of what Baba Buntu has already said, we're all Africans. At the end of the day, we all need to take pride and identity in being an African child and being a black child and understanding and right now, how then do we forge those relationships? But let's quickly speak to my sister Mona. My sister, you know what? At the end of the day, Musadi ke Musadi, Baba feeling, I'm influenced by what I'm influenced by. Perhaps you can take us through that.
Hello, my name is Malusanda. I am highly influenced and I really respect African American women.
Okay.
I am who I am today because of the Oprahs and the Ian Lavanzans.
Okay.
I was raped when I was 19 years old and then I was raped again when I was 24. I couldn't speak about it until I saw a black woman on TV speaking about it. The problem is that we're not looking ukuthi sibheke umuntu ukuthi umuntu ubani. I mean, activists for all women. Their hair, it's just hair. You can take it off. I just love.
I love that.
Each and every single African. It's, you know, as Tandaneni as women.
That's powerful.
In America, in South Africa, let's just come together, you know, and break these communication barriers. Drop the weaves, drop the makeup, and just talk to one another and love one another.
So, and I'm. Just a quick one, and firstly, thank you, Sabong, which was a little to stand, which is a personal story. Do you believe, Uguti, the image has affected a lot of what we think about the black woman? Because I feel like a lot of the time, the hair, the makeup, the image, plastic, versus the actual mind of a black woman, the actual heart of a black woman. Do you think it's affected?
Yes, we are, but now it comes back to education. Knowing when a woman wants to look good, it doesn't mean that she's hiding something or she's being stupid or maybe she's not, she doesn't have any value. A woman can be beautiful, be intelligent, be driven, and be courageous, you know. I'm an activist. Sometimes I wear weaves, sometimes I cut my hair. It doesn't mean when I'm cutting my hair, I'm less of an activist than when I have the weave on.
I wish I
We also have Mkanyiso on the couch. Welcome onto the couch.
Yeah,
I think you've really just excited Mrs. Swam. You're excited. And the reason why I'm excited is because you've opened up a very big conversation around, and I think it was a social media we had earlier on, speaking about, I have learned more about being African from African Americans, right? It's such an important conversation, but also earlier on when we were doing our rehearsals, there was a young lady, and I can't see her right now in studio, who said wearing short skirts is not an African thing. But at the same time, you look at movements like the Me Too movement, where we start to speak about conversations where here in Africa, we might have been afraid of, whereas African Americans gave us the courage to now speak about them. I want to speak quickly before we get to you, Putinkanyiso, and maybe perhaps between you, Horatia, and Nwoma, to say, what is the role that media then plays in shaping these conversations and positioning us as Africans?
Wow. I have a little thing against media sometimes because I run my own business. And in the startup space, we also get interviewed by different people, and people do cover stories on our company. And so when we had a recent story being done on us by CNBC Africa, I specifically told them to be careful about the narrative.
The wording.
Do not say that it's this young poor girls in Africa struggling with whatever. I said you need to make sure sure that you tell them we have MBAs. You need to make sure that you tell them we have a tech company. You need to tell them that our solution is helping alleviate poverty by providing a platform for African brands to be able to sell on it.
Sure.
So I was very specific, and I said that, listen, if the narrative is not appealing or puts us in a bright light, then I'd rather not have the story run.
Yeah, that's a powerful
But that gets to a point where we have to be careful. We need to take over the narrative that's been spoken about us, which means we need to do everything with excellence, and we need to demand excellence as services to us as well.
Sure. Can you so asikufake bhuti wami, I mean sizokhuluma ngento asiqhathanisi siyabuza, which is a simple thing. Fees must fall versus Black Lives Matter. The movement, who are people affected. I mean, when we bona kanjani, is it the same thing? Is it a different comparison of life? What is it?
Well, I think to me it's the same thing that happened in different regions, because our history and Black American history is more like the same, because they went through Jimmy Crow, we went through apartheid. I mean, those are the same things. So the outcomes are most likely to be the same. I mean, we're a post-colonial secular country as things stands today.
Sure.
So, I mean, the solidarity amongst ourselves, Black solidarity, is very much important, because we experience, our Black bodies experience same experience in the post-colonial era. So I think it's very much the same. It's just that one thing that we have to admit is that oneness does not mean the sameness.
But are we getting the same support from for those issues as we give America? We talk police brutality, we're talking the Black Lives Matter issue, even the Me Too issue. I mean, it took a while for South Africa to pick up and say we also have our own Me Too story. But when it was an American, when it was the Weinsteins, we were all fighting it. When it was Steve Harvey, and not Steve Harvey, what's his name? Bill Cosby, we're all on it. Are they giving us the same support when it comes to those social issues?
Well, I think media does play a role in how do they report these stories, how do they portray Africa and how do they portray America, and then build the relationship between ourselves as to how we view each other. And I think it's very much inconsequential on what is the relationship between us and Americans. But most importantly, there are things that Americans they've taken from us, like hashtag men are trash. It's a South African concept, but it's now in America.
It's a very important one.
I mean, hashtag Me Too, it's an American concept that we have adopted, women coming out on social media and say, I was raped. I think there is some sort of connection, but we are lacking there and there because of the media. That is, how do they report about ourselves?
Exactly. I'd want to add to this.
Just hold the adding. I'm going to give you we just quickly need to go to an ad break. When we come back, we pick it up with you, and then also we take it back to the professor to find out, do we still need to put in any effort? Is it still worth it? Please stay with us after the break. Well, we've been talking about this. I mean, for the entire episode, all I've heard today, there is a potential chance of collaboration between Runali African Americans, because the stories are not Tswana, and that's what we want to delve a little bit into. Segment. Where are those connections that we can make in today's time? How then do we change the media to be able to give? I mean, we live in a global space, guys. Twitter is a big space. Facebook, social media, for that opportunity to educate our sisters and brothers that are living in America. Are we doing enough, and do we actually have an interest? And perhaps we can go back to Wame and just get a little bit of what she wanted to say in terms of the media.
Yes. So, honestly, it was so wonderful really thinking about the way that media plays a role in our understanding of each other. I saw a play in Brooklyn called The Fall that was about the Fees Must Fall movement. And there's a lot of work that we've already been doing to spread the messages, but we need to do more, and we can control the media. It is up to us to do the work. And we can make a power, we can really power that narrative. It's not about anyone over us saying what needs to be shown and what needs to be done. We can control it, and we need to take that power into our own hands.
Probably a short question. You look at the music aspect, I mean, as an artist, you understand the challenges we have, right? I mean, Rick Ross was in the country, he came and you understand? For us seeing an international artist like a Rick Ross coming to the township of South Africa America was a big thing for us. It was huge. But now for the future, how do we get to make it a big thing? Like you said, a show like The Fall for You, but how do we make it beyond just social media in a communal aspects? Because I mean, I feel like there's a huge gap that we're failing to fill in conversation. I don't know if any of you can answer it. Maybe even Prof, maybe you'd have a bit of an opinion on that question.
I think it's happening. We're already seeing connections between African Americans and Africa in our time. I just came back from Sierra Leone where 45 African Americans went to visit to make a connection there. We're seeing the year of homecoming that happened. Why were we all so excited about the Black Panther? Because people want to know. And because I'm an educator, I'm going to say it, education is key.
Yeah.
If we don't know about each other, we can't understand each other. So I think as we begin to learn about each other, as we begin to educate ourselves and recognize that no, we're not the same. You know, I'm African American, I'm Sierra Leonean, I'm South African, we're different, but there are commonalities.
Yeah.
We have commonalities and we should tap into those in the world that we live in today.
And perhaps before we go to my brother, let's quickly just ask Nkanyiso this question. Listen, Nkanyiso, what about those people that feel where America erata go expropriate the culture ya Africa? What do we say to them? And also, where we're doing South African stories, but we are casting Americans.
I don't think it's mimicking the African culture. Obviously, even though they are Americans, but they're still Africans, as Prof has already alluded to that fact. So I think it's about looking up to Africa because they also have embraced that they're African even though they are in America. So it's not mimicking, but it's embracing the African identity.
But do you want to hear an American Winnie Mandela?
Of course.
If we're doing a story about Winnie Madikizela Mandela, are you happy to hear an American woman playing that role?
I think that is very much important because when we're speaking about Winnie Mandela, it's important that we identify South African who can play a role because the story of Winnie Mandela happened in South Africa. Even though it was around oppression of people in Winnie Mandela fighting against apartheid. But it's very much important and most of the people will relate if Winnie Mandela role is played by someone who's from South Africa. And there's really nothing wrong with that.
It's very interesting. Maybe we can read some a bit of before we come to you, Professor. Zenati Amanda Mkungwa, the difference between us here at home in America is that when Americans left Africa, they also lost touch with their roots and culture due to the situation they were facing at the time. But they never forgot where they came from. As for us here, we're still very much in touch with our roots. And I know, my brother, that's something you wanted to comment on. Yeah.
Okay, ke Thetha Midshao. Bara tloga gale modisha go mo tsona shakeng ke nana ke re as mapedi as ba ma Africa re lahlile go tloa le morago kwa whereby ma Americans ba rena ba lenga kwa America ba nyaka go tseba tse rena re di dirao ka mo. So for us to meet with them because they want to ba nyaka go bona rena ka Africa re dira diro se jwang. So ba khotsa lo ka Africa re dira selo ka sekgowa. So therefore now abasa gona bona re ga botse go tla diragala eng. But ke nana ke re le media o santse no ralo ka karolo e kgolo mokwe whereby now the presenters tsa rena go be le di show tse dintsi tsa setso go be le di show tsa go swana tsona so a re apareng go swana ka mo go re apareng ka gona whatever e direge according to dilo tsa ga borena because we re ka re ile kwa segweng go feta ke a leboga
papa. I don't know, Arisha, you seem to disagree with Nkanyiso when he said, when he you were like, nah, we're not doing that. Quickly come in there before we end the show.
I just liked the point on education.
Yes.
And the education means that, guess what, guys? There's people who are just as qualified.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give practical ways that we in this audience are able to share the narrative of Africans.
Yeah.
When you see a video online or an image online of your brother or sister locally, sharing, liking, that is spreading it through the internet has no borders, right? So you see something because it's from a poor phone, it's not good quality, that's okay. You just start by sharing it. You start by saying, look, there's a brother of mine who can actually speak proper Zulu and play that role, let them get in.
Yes.
And it's the same discussion I think you were having on the show yesterday where it's like, okay, if you don't say something and if you don't fix it from the time of the person who's going to actually be the actress there, who's going to say, okay, I'm going to show you Africa in its raw form. We're not going to have other people come and show you what Africa is through their eyes.
Aesthetically decorated Africa.
No, so you have to be in charge of that.
And I think
Our relationship with America is a very old relationship. If you understand E.W. Du Bois, Kwame Nkrumah, the fathers of Pan-Africanism who came together, believe that Africa has to unite. Wherever you are in the world, you have to unite. So then they came with the concept of Pan-Africanism. And we were seen also with the Black Consciousness movement. It is about us, Black people, coming together in the world, in Africa. It doesn't matter where we are.
And representation matters. Like that's the issue. It's. I mean, in all honesty, there is so many years.
Guys, there's this thing that says, unfortunately, we can't even continue this conversation, but thank you to all our guests. Remember, we do hang this on our live Facebook, so it's going to be there forever. You can go and add your comment.
And our conversation doesn't stop in studio, it does carry on social media. We'll have all these voices for you. What are their lasting thoughts on this conversation and what else they can send out into the world? Remember, we are back tomorrow, 10:30 to 11 o'clock. What are we talking about? It's going to be very interesting.
I was about to sell it, but now you said interesting. Interesting sounds better than my plan. But that's exactly what's going on, of course, and please go to Kumbulu with Siantani Makai.